These days, everyone in the YouTube camera space is talking about the best bang for buck vintage lenses you can adapt to modern cameras. I fell into this rabbit hole pretty early in my photography and videography journey, and now pretty much exclusively shoot on vintage glass. One lens that I own has always stood leaps and bounds ahead of the rest of the collection, and that would be the Pentax SMC Takumar 55mm f2. Okay, so to clarify, there's 4 different iterations of this lens. Pentax had 4 different families of lenses from the mid-1950s all the way to the early 1970s, I believe. The Auto Takumar family, the Super Takumar family, and lastly, the one I'll be speaking about is the SMC Takumar family. Pentax has been making the SMC coated lenses for years and years and years, but what's really cool about this lens is it's the very first iteration of the Pentax SMC lens, while still being the last iteration of the Takumar family lenses. With all the nerdy shit out of the way, let's actually look at some stills, we'll look at some videos, and we'll dive into the performance of this lens, because it's a kick-ass lens. I couldn't be happier with it. So I took this lens out for some night street photography, some sunset photography at the Lonsdale Quay, and shot some B-roll throughout Robson and downtown Vancouver just to show you guys the performance of the lens. The low light performance on this lens is fantastic. F2 is by no means the fastest of all time, especially considering in the Takumar family from different iterations, there's 1.4s and 1.8s, I believe. But there's something special about the F2. Throughout the entire aperture range, it's just a powerhouse. Whether you want like the film look softness or whether you want something tack sharp, you know, there's something there for everyone. And that's what I think makes this lens so special. I think wide open at night is where the lens's characteristics really show, and it really shows how good this lens can truly be. The lens's glass is very high contrast right out of camera, I noticed. I find myself shooting on digital, I have to underexpose quite a bit. I mean, obviously on film, you're always overexposing, but when shooting digitally, I found myself underexposing quite a bit to try and preserve some of the highlights instead of just blowing everything out. Having that slight chromatic aberration that almost mimics halation, it has quite a bit of bloom to it wide open. It's a very, very beautiful lens in terms of its characteristics. The one thing you will notice when shooting it wide open with this lens is it has a relatively strong vignette. It's not the craziest I've seen, but it's pretty prominent, as well as the softness in the corners. The nice thing is, it stays pretty damn sharp in the center. You know, this lens was released sometime between 1971 and 72. It's not perfect, but it gives that feel and that vibe while still holding true to being a decent lens and holding up in terms of sharpness and holding up. It really stands the test of time and actually allows you to get that sort of look. Moving on towards the Lonsdale Quay at the Christmas market, I took some more sample photos during sunset. These photos I think are really where this lens shines clinically. So between f4 and f8, f4 can be a little bit soft, but 5.6 and f8, that's where the lens is gonna be the most clinical. It still has high contrast. It's still gonna have pretty strong colors. It's a relatively warm lens as well. All of these lenses are thorium coated, and the yellowing can kind of rear its head. So when you get these lenses, you can UV treat them. You can leave them for a month or 2 in the sun. Like every time you're done shooting with it, like put it in your window. You can buy a $10 UV light just to kill it off, or you can do what I do. Mine's not too bad, so I just white balance every time I swap to the lens. Another nice thing too is between f11 and f16, that's where you're gonna get the softest image. I find that it does kill off a little bit of the contrast from the lens, at least like the natural glass contrast to it. You get a little bit more of a flatter image, a little bit softer, which also kind of adds to more of that 70s look. You're gonna have a little bit of chromatic aberration at f16. It's kind of the same thing as wide open. It doesn't completely go away. I think on both ends of the spectrum, the aberration is like that. I think the aberration is pretty much gone towards the center of your aperture, towards f8, but at f16 and at f2, that's when it's gonna be most prominent. So it's almost like a bow. Let's just dig into the pros of this lens. First off, the center sharpness is tack sharp. This is a great lens, especially when you're me and you miss focus, and when you miss focus, it's still kind of sharp. I mean, having that said, it's softer than modern glass. Most people buying vintage glass aren't going for like you're not looking to buy a competitor of a G Master lens or anything like that, or a new Canon RF lens. But if you're after a good vintage sort of feel and you want these quirks, this is a great lens to start because it is sharp. You know, like when you go to, you can just throw it at f8 and it will be sharp, and you're gonna get good images out of it, as long as you're not like me and missing focus. Another great thing about shooting wide open with this lens is how smooth the bokeh is. Completely wide open, it is perfectly circular. It is fantastic, especially for a lens that's 6 aperture blades. So when you stop down, you know, it's not gonna be perfectly circular, but I think this is another quirk that really adds to the feel. I'm gonna be saying things in this video that are like vibe and feel and stuff like that, but I think those are kind of the things that you're gonna get with a lens like this. These are the things that at least I like in my lenses. When you combine these little small quirks all together, like that little bit of vignetting, that little bit of chromatic aberration, when you add that little bit of softness in the edges, when you have a little bit of each and they all combine together, I think that's what really creates that filmic look from, you know, the 70s and 80s. It's not so much like, oh, it's super soft with no vignetting, or it's not just a lot of one thing. It's a lot of these little things added together, including fringing and things like that. Another thing I have to mention, the build quality on these is fantastic. Like they're all metal and glass construction, like very, very solid. They have enough weight for them to feel like you were holding something valuable, but they're light enough to be an everyday shooter, even with an adapter. And they're small. They're really small lenses. Even with the adapter, they're small lenses. They're very easy to just have ready to go for your modern camera, or, you know, this is an M42 mount. So if you have any M42 mount camera, you're ready to rock. Like, I got this lens with an SP1000 Pentax, and it's, ever since I got that camera from a thrift store for $10, that is true. I hate to be that guy, but that is true. So now that I'm actually going over this stuff and talking about it and going through pros and cons, realistically, pros and cons for vintage lenses are kind of obsolete because they're vintage lenses. You know what you're gonna get. You know you're gonna get softness. You know you're gonna get chromatic aberration. You know you're gonna get softness in the edges and vignetting and fringing and all this stuff. But in reality, that's kind of what you're buying them for. Like, you're buying them for that feel. I think the thing that people want to know is how much of each of those things you get. I think what's special about this lens is you get all of it, but it's all to such a small amount that it just paints this kind of picture where it's just a feel. It's not except for the vignetting. The vignetting wide open, okay, that's pretty strong. So overall, this lens is robust. It's capable of a lot. It's a great focal length. 55 is fantastic. You know, obviously the nifty 50, but that's tiny bit of being punched in is fantastic to have. So now, having all of these pros said, this lens is regularly posted on eBay for $50 USD, usually around 60, 65 Canadian. Obviously keep an eye out for shipping. That's where eBay usually likes to you. But this is a very, very good lens for that kind of price. And I'm kind of glad that I'm making this video early on in my YouTube channel, because that means it's not gonna blow up in price. The people who see this video, you're gonna be able to get this lens affordably. I checked today, I saw one for $40 USD. So go ahead, rip it up, buy them. They're also kind of rare. So this is a good example of rarity not translating to value. So it'll be a cool talking piece. They only made a certain amount between 1971 and 1972 in small production numbers before switching to the bayonet K mount. So you can get a cool talking piece, you can get a rare lens, and it's a great everyday shooter. You don't have to worry about losing it or anything. So lastly, would you pick up this lens? Or what's your favorite vintage lens that you own? Comment below, let me know. Thanks so much for watching. Like and subscribe. I'm releasing new videos every second Sunday now. So I'm trying to keep on top of this stuff, whether it's photography stuff or whether it's car stuff or drifting or whatever it is. You know, I'm trying to make this channel a little bit more broad than it used to be. I'm trying to dive into some more stuff. So yeah, like and subscribe, and thanks so much for watching. Peace.